The sun hung low in the sky over Dallas, casting a warm glow on the city as David Carter stepped out of a sleek black SUV. The driver, dressed in a crisp suit, rolled David's luggage behind him while he adjusted his tailored navy blazer, exuding a calm confidence. He was a man who understood his worth, embodying a blend of professionalism and approachability without needing to draw attention to himself. Tonight, he was in town to finalize a monumental $3.8 billion merger with the Benley Group, a deal that had been nearly 2 years in the making. As David entered the luxurious Lexington Tower hotel, he was immediately enveloped by an atmosphere that felt both inviting and oddly tense. The lobby was adorned with sparkling chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements, but he could sense the subtle scrutiny from those around him. It wasn't the kind of attention that made one feel welcome. It was a mix of curiosity and judgment. A couple sipping espresso exchanged glances, whispering to one another as David passed, their eyes lingering on him before they turned away. Nearby, a man dressed in a plaid shirt nudged his friend, gesturing subtly toward David's luggage, their laughter barely muffled but sharp enough to cut through the air. Unfazed, David approached the front desk, where a young woman with an auburn ponytail was busy typing on her computer, chewing gum in a way that suggested she was more interested in her phone than her job. "Good evening. Checking in," David said, offering a polite smile. "A reservation under David Carter." The clerk glanced up, her expression shifting from disinterest to surprise, as her eyes fell on David's Centurion card, a sleek, solid metal credit card that signified exclusivity and wealth. However, instead of treating it with the respect it deserved, she let out a short laugh, her mouth twisting into a smirk. "Wow, you've got one of these?" she remarked, her tone mocking. It was as if she believed the card was a novelty rather than a symbol of David's success. David felt a rush of indignation, but he remained composed, his patience unwavering. He recognized the tone all too well. He had faced this kind of disrespect before. "Is there an issue with my card?" he inquired calmly, maintaining eye contact. The clerk shrugged, her demeanor dismissive. "No, I don't usually see these come through here. It's usually, executives." Behind him, David could hear the low chuckle of the man in the plaid shirt again, heightening the sense of humiliation that began to settle over him. In that moment, he decided enough was enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, dialing the number of his assistant. "Cancel the room block and inform Mr. Harris that the merger is off," he said, his voice steady and deliberate. The clerk blinked, processing his words slowly. "The whole thing?" came the voice on the other end of the line, filled with confusion. "Every last bit of it," David affirmed, hanging up the phone with a firm finality. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing the clerk's. "I'll be staying elsewhere," he stated clearly before turning on his heel, rolling his bag behind him, and exiting through the revolving doors. Inside the hotel, the atmosphere shifted dramatically as David departed. The assistant manager, Rachel Adams, had been observing the exchange from a distance, her brow furrowing in concern. She rushed over to the front desk, her voice tense. "What just happened?" The clerk, still twirling a pen, nervously replied, "Just some guy trying to check in with a fake Centurion card or something. He got all weird when I asked him about it." Rachel's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications of the incident. "A fake Centurion card? Did you even verify it?" "No," the clerk admitted, her confidence crumbling. "He just left, like he was important or something." Rachel's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. "His name was David Carter," she said, recalling the profile she had seen earlier. David was not just any guest. He was the lead on the merger that could have brought significant revenue to the hotel. Meanwhile, David had crossed the street to the Bishop House, a modest boutique hotel known for its understated elegance and respectful service. He felt a wave of relief wash over him as he checked in, grateful for a place where he could be treated with dignity. The city buzzed around him, but he was ready to take control of the narrative, knowing that his silence could speak volumes. As he settled into his new surroundings, David reflected on the weight of his decision. He knew this moment was about more than just a canceled deal. It was a statement about respect, power, and the importance of standing firm against prejudice. His phone buzzed, and he looked down at a message from his friend, Alex. "Heard what happened? You good?" David paused before typing back, "Yeah, just tired." But deep down, he felt a fire igniting, ready to challenge the assumptions that had just been laid bare. David Carter stood in the lobby of the Bishop House, taking a moment to breathe in the calm, inviting atmosphere that surrounded him. The hotel was a stark contrast to the chaos he had just left behind at the Lexington Tower. Here, there was no overwhelming grandeur, just a sense of comfort and respect. The decor was simple, yet elegant, with warm wood accents and soft lighting that made it feel like home. As he glanced around, David noticed the attentive staff greeting guests with genuine smiles, a welcoming atmosphere he had longed for after the earlier incident. David was not just any businessman. He was the founder and CEO of Carter Innovations, a leading tech firm specializing in logistics solutions. Over the years, he had built his company from the ground up, transforming a small startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. His journey had not been easy. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Chicago, he had always been aware of the challenges posed by societal expectations and biases. Despite his accomplishments, he often found himself navigating a world that still viewed him through a lens of skepticism, particularly in high-stakes environments. As he settled into the cozy lounge area of the Bishop House, David reflected on the events of the evening. The merger with the Benley Group was not just a business deal. It represented years of hard work and perseverance. However, the condescending attitude of the hotel staff had turned what should have been a triumphant moment into a painful reminder of the discrimination he often faced. The thought of the clerk's laughter echoed in his mind, a stark reminder of the prejudice that still lingered in many corners of society. Meanwhile, back at the Lexington Tower, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Rachel Adams, the assistant manager, was gathering information about the incident that had just transpired. She was determined to understand how such a serious error had occurred. The hotel's reputation was at stake, and she knew that handling the situation poorly could have catastrophic consequences. "Can you explain to me what happened at the front desk?" Rachel asked Megan, the clerk, who was visibly shaken. Megan shifted uncomfortably, her confidence wavering under Rachel's scrutiny. "I didn't mean anything by it. He just seemed out of place," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel's expression hardened. "Out of place? He was a confirmed guest with a reservation. You mocked him in front of other guests, Megan. That's unacceptable." She could see the realization dawning on Megan's face as the weight of her actions sank in. "We need to address this immediately. I want you to write a formal report outlining what happened." As Rachel gathered her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her stomach. David Carter wasn't just any guest. He was a prominent figure in the business world, and this incident could damage not only their relationship with him, but also the hotel's standing in the community. The stakes were high, and Rachel understood that they needed to act quickly to mitigate the fallout. At the same time, in his room at the Bishop House, David received a text from his assistant, Laura. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay?" He hesitated for a moment before replying, "Not great. Just had a rough check-in experience." He knew that Laura would understand the deeper implications behind his words. They had worked together for years, and she was always supportive, encouraging him to stand firm in the face of adversity. David took a deep breath, allowing the calmness of his new surroundings to wash over him. He was determined not to let the incident define him or his company. Instead, he resolved to turn this moment into a teachable opportunity, not just for himself, but for those who could learn from his experience. His phone buzzed again with a message from Laura. "Let's focus on the meeting tomorrow. You've got this." Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, David prepared for what lay ahead. He would not only fight for the merger, but also advocate for respect and understanding in the business world. The challenges he faced were not just personal, they were systemic, and he was ready to confront them head-on. It was time to remind everyone that respect was non-negotiable, regardless of the circumstances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Dallas, David Carter sat in his room at the Bishop House, contemplating the series of events that had led him here. The earlier humiliation at the Lexington Tower still stung, but he was determined to take control of the narrative. He knew that his next steps were crucial, not just for himself, but also for his company and the industry at large. Meanwhile, back at the Lexington Tower, Rachel Adams was on high alert. She gathered the management team in a conference room to discuss the incident. The atmosphere was tense as they sat around the large oval table, faces drawn and serious. Rachel opened the meeting, her voice steady but urgent. "We need to talk about what just happened with Mr. Carter. This isn't just a minor issue. It could have severe repercussions for our hotel and our reputation." Howard, the general manager, leaned forward, rubbing his temples. "What exactly went wrong? How did we let this happen?" he asked, frustration evident in his tone. Rachel glanced around the room, her gaze landing on Megan, the clerk who had interacted with David. "Megan, can you explain your thought process during the check-in?" Megan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her previous bravado replaced by a sense of impending doom. "I didn't mean to offend him. I just thought, he didn't look like the typical guest we get here," she stammered, her voice shaky. Rachel interjected, her tone firm. "That's the problem. You assumed things based on his appearance rather than treating him with the respect that every guest deserves. He was a high-profile client, leading a significant merger for this hotel. You mocked him in front of others, and that's unacceptable." A heavy silence fell over the room as the gravity of the situation sank in. Trina, the hotel's public relations officer, broke the silence. "This isn't just about a single guest. This is about how we are perceived as a brand. If this story gets out, it could damage our reputation irreparably." Dev, the financial officer, nodded in agreement. "We've invested a lot in building our brand. Losing a client like Carter could cost us millions, not just now, but in future deals as well. We need to act fast." Meanwhile, Rachel felt a growing sense of urgency. "We need to reach out to Mr. Carter and apologize. We can't let this escalate." She could see the reluctance in her colleagues' expressions, but she pressed on. "It's our duty to make this right. If we don't, we risk losing not just his business, but the trust of all our clients." Back at the Bishop House, David received a call from Laura, his assistant. "David, I just heard what happened at the Lexington. Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. David sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. "I'm fine, but it's frustrating. I thought we were past this kind of treatment in the business world. It's like no matter how far I climb, I still have to prove myself." Laura's voice softened. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've built an incredible company from the ground up. Just focus on what's next. You have the meeting with the Benley Group tomorrow. You can still make this work." David appreciated her support, but he knew that the incident was more than just a personal slight. It was a reflection of broader societal issues. "I know, but this isn't just about me. It's about how people perceive others based on their appearance. It's systemic, and it needs to change." As David prepared for bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that the incident at the Lexington Tower was just the beginning of something bigger. He resolved to use his voice and influence to challenge the status quo, not only within his industry, but across society. He would turn this painful experience into an opportunity for dialogue and change. Tomorrow, he would not only face the Benley Group, but also bring awareness to the prejudices that still persisted in the business world. The tension between David and the Lexington management team was about to escalate, and David was ready to confront it head-on, armed with his experiences and the strength of his convictions. The world needed to hear his story, and he was prepared to share it. As he settled in for the night, He felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to stand firm
against the biases that had sought to undermine him. The morning sun broke over Dallas, illuminating the city with a bright glow. David Carter awoke feeling refreshed, but resolute. The events of the previous evening weighed heavily on his mind, and he knew he needed to channel that energy into the upcoming meeting with the Benley Group. He had spent years building his company, and he wasn't about to let a moment of disrespect define him or derail his plans.
Meanwhile, back at the Lexington Tower, the management team was in full crisis mode. Rachel Adams gathered everyone in the conference room, her expression serious as they prepared to discuss the fallout from the incident. "We need to understand the implications of what happened last night," she began, her voice steady but urgent. "David Carter is not just any guest. He is the CEO of Carter Innovations, a major player in the tech industry. His decision to walk away from the merger is a significant blow to us." Howard, the general manager, sighed heavily. "What are we going to do? We can't just sit here and hope this blows over. We need to take action, and we need to do it quickly." Trina, the public relations officer, interjected, "We should issue a public apology, not just to Mr. Carter, but to our entire clientele. We need to show that we take this seriously and are committed to making changes." Megan sat quietly in the corner, her face pale. She had not fully grasped the repercussions of her actions until now. Hearing the team discuss the potential damage made her stomach churn. "I didn't mean to offend him." She finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think." Rachel looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and concern. That's exactly the issue, Megan. You didn't think. You let your biases dictate your actions, and now we're facing a crisis because of it." She turned back to the rest of the team. "We need to ensure this doesn't happen again. Training for all staff on diversity and inclusion should be our next step." As the meeting continued, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Dev, the financial officer, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "We need to prepare for the potential backlash. If this story gets out, it could go viral, and we might find ourselves at the center of a media storm." Meanwhile, David was in his room reviewing his notes for the meeting with the Benley Group. He received a message from Laura, checking in on him. "Any updates?" she texted. David replied, "Just getting ready for the meeting. I need to make sure I address everything that happened. This isn't just about the merger. It's about standing up against prejudice." Laura responded quickly, "You're right. Let them see your strength. You have the power to influence change." Feeling a surge of determination, David prepared for the day ahead. He knew the stakes were high, and he was ready to stand firm against any challenges that might arise. Back at the Lexington Tower, Rachel and her team were scrambling to draft an apology letter to David. She knew they needed to act swiftly, but she also felt a sense of urgency to address the underlying issues that had led to this moment. They began crafting a statement that acknowledged their mistake and committed to fostering a more inclusive environment. As they worked, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling of dread. She knew that their reputation was on the line, and the world would be watching closely. They needed to show that they were taking responsibility for their actions and were willing to learn from this experience. On the other side of town, David arrived at the venue for the meeting with the Benley Group. As he walked through the doors, he couldn't help but notice the buzz of anticipation in the air. He spotted several executives from Benley gathered around a large conference table, reviewing presentation materials. David took a deep breath, stepping into the room with confidence. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, his voice clear and steady. "I'm here to discuss our potential partnership. But first, I feel it's important to address some recent events that have come to light." As David began to speak, he felt a wave of determination wash over him. He was prepared to confront not only the business challenges ahead, but also the deeper issues that had impacted his journey. Today was not about a merger. It was about standing up for respect and equality in the business world, and he was ready to make his voice heard.
As the meeting with the Benley Group commenced, David Carter stood at the head of the conference table, his presence commanding attention. He could sense the weight of the moment, not just for himself, but for everyone in the room. The executives from Benley, who had gathered around him, were eager to hear his perspective after the dramatic turn of events that had unfolded at the Lexington Tower.
Thank you all for being here today, David began, his voice steady and confident. Before we dive into the specifics of the merger, I think it's important to address the issue that arose during my stay at the Lexington Tower. What happened there is not just a reflection of one individual's actions. It's indicative of a larger problem that persists in our industry and society as a whole. The room fell silent, all eyes on David as he continued. He spoke passionately about the incident, sharing how a seemingly trivial moment had turned into a significant reminder of the biases and assumptions that people still faced, regardless of their achievements. As a businessman, I have spent years building my company and navigating a world that often underestimates me based on my appearance, he stated. It's disheartening to know that even in high-stakes environments, prejudices can still influence how we are treated. The executives from Benley exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, while others appeared visibly uncomfortable. David pressed on, determined to make an impact. This merger is not just a financial transaction. It represents a partnership. For that partnership to succeed, we must ensure that respect and understanding are foundational values. If we cannot acknowledge the biases that exist, we may risk jeopardizing not just this deal, but our professional integrity. Meanwhile, back at the Lexington Tower, Rachel Adams and her team were monitoring the situation closely. News of David's statements had begun to ripple through social media, creating a buzz that was hard to ignore. The hotel's public relations team was frantically drafting statements and preparing for potential media inquiries. Rachel felt the pressure mounting. They needed to act decisively to repair the damage done. In the conference room, as David concluded his remarks, he could see the executives processing what he had said. I appreciate your willingness to engage in this conversation, he continued. I believe we have the opportunity to create a partnership that sets a new standard in our industry, one that prioritizes inclusivity and respect. As the discussion shifted toward the details of the merger, David felt a sense of relief. The executives were receptive, and they began discussing ways to enhance their collaboration. They spoke about innovative projects and long-term goals, weaving in the importance of fostering an inclusive culture within their organizations. David could sense a shift in the atmosphere, a collective desire to move forward on a path that benefited everyone involved. However, the impact of David's speech reached far beyond the conference room. As news outlets began to cover the story, headlines emerged that highlighted
not only the canceled merger, but also the underlying issues of racial bias in the corporate world. Social media exploded with conversations about respect and equality as people shared their own experiences of discrimination, resonating with David's narrative. Back at the Lexington Tower, Rachel realized that this could be a turning point for their establishment.
She gathered her team again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. We need to turn this into an opportunity for growth, she said, determined. Let's implement training sessions on diversity and inclusivity for all staff. We owe it to ourselves and to our guests to ensure that this never happens again. As the days passed, both David and Rachel found themselves grappling with the repercussions of their actions. David was hailed as a leader who stood up against injustice, while Rachel worked tirelessly to rebuild the hotel's reputation. The incident had sparked a movement, one that called for accountability and change within the corporate landscape. In the end, David realized that what had begun as a painful experience had transformed into a powerful moment of awakening for many. He felt a sense of responsibility to continue advocating for change, using his platform to elevate voices that often went unheard. The merger with the Benley Group was just the beginning. He knew that together, they could create a lasting impact, not just in their respective companies, but across the industry as a whole. As he reflected on everything that had transpired, David understood that true power came not from wealth or status, but from the ability to inspire others to recognize their worth and demand respect. It was a lesson he would carry with him, ready to share with anyone willing to listen. The ripple effect of his actions had only just begun, and he was determined to see it through. As the days turned into weeks following the incident at the Lexington Tower, David Carter felt a surge of responsibility to leverage his experience for a greater purpose. The media coverage surrounding the canceled merger with the Benley Group had sparked a national conversation about racial bias and respect in the business world. David was determined to be at the forefront of this dialogue, using his platform to advocate for change. One afternoon, David received an invitation to speak at a local community center in South Dallas. The event was aimed at young professionals
and aspiring entrepreneurs, providing them with a chance to learn from successful leaders in various industries.
David felt this was the perfect opportunity to share not only his story, but also the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. On the day of the event, David arrived at the community center, greeted by a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The room was filled with eager faces, a mix of students, interns, and young professionals, all eager to hear from someone they admired. As he took the stage, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. This was his chance to inspire others and encourage them to embrace their identities confidently. "Good afternoon, everyone," David began, his voice calm yet powerful. "Today, I want to talk about what true power looks like. Power isn't just about wealth or status. It's about understanding who you are and standing firm in your worth, especially in the face of adversity." As he spoke, David recounted the events leading up to the canceled merger and the discriminatory treatment he had faced at the hotel. He emphasized how critical it was to address biases head-on, not only for oneself, but for the collective benefit of society. "We must acknowledge that these issues exist and that they affect people's lives every day. My experience is just one of many, and it's time for us to demand respect in all spaces, especially in business." The audience listened intently, some nodding along as David shared his insights. "When I walked away from that merger, it wasn't out of anger. It was a conscious decision to value myself and my worth. If someone cannot respect you, then you have the power to walk away and seek out spaces that do." He continued, "Each of you has the potential to make an impact, not just through your work, but through your presence. When you face disrespect, remember that it's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of the biases of others. Don't let anyone define your place at the table.
You are the table." As David concluded his talk, the audience erupted in applause. He could see the spark of inspiration in their eyes, a testament to the impact of his words. After the presentation, many attendees approached him, eager to share their stories and express their gratitude. One young woman in a vibrant yellow hoodie stepped forward, her voice slightly trembling.
"Mr. Carter, my dad is a janitor, and he followed your story. He said it gave him hope. Thank you for standing up for people like us." David smiled warmly, touched by her words. "Please tell your dad that his hard work and resilience matter. It's people like him who inspire change every day." Later that evening, as he returned to his office, David reflected on the day's events. He felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a difference. The conversation about respect and equality was gaining momentum, and he was proud to be a part of it. Back at the Lexington Tower, Rachel Adams was also feeling the effects of the recent upheaval. The hotel management had implemented new training protocols focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed the staff interacting more respectfully with guests, making an effort to create a welcoming environment for everyone. Rachel had learned from her mistakes and was committed to ensuring that the hotel would never again fall prey to biases. She understood that the journey toward change was ongoing, but she was determined to be part of that progress. As David's story continued to resonate in the media and among the public, he realized that the ripple effect of his experience was far-reaching. It was about more than just one merger. It was about creating a movement that challenged outdated norms and pushed for a more equitable future. With each speaking engagement, interview, and conversation, David reinforced the idea that true leadership involves uplifting others and creating spaces where everyone feels valued. He was ready to continue this journey, knowing that the fight for respect and equality was far from over. Together, they could reshape the narrative and inspire a new generation to embrace their power and demand the respect they deserved.